I'm just saying it sounds a little bit odd to me, you know? I mean, sorry to piss you off, on your Sabbath day and so on, but man. All right, this is Yalak, and today is December 30, 2017. My lesson today is titled Adamic Ethiopians. Now, I've told you enough times already in the earlier videos when I started looking into Adam and the Garden of Eden and Eve, and the language issue as well in the Bible, that I'm no history person, I'm not well studied in those areas dealing with history and the deep things of the Torah and, ancient nations. But I had to ask some questions along the way because I just find it a little difficult to read the scriptures the same way as I did before, because there are just too many liars out there. There's a lot of deception in the earth anyway. And the book that I'm reading, we call it the Bible, even though they tell us the Bible is a pagan word to call this book from the Creator. So you can understand why I would want to ask all these different kinds of questions. But as I look at this title of this lesson, Adamic Ethiopians, I am reminded of so many people who have pointed out that the Garden of Eden may well be Ethiopia or somewhere there. Of course, like I've said before, others will say it's elsewhere. But they've pointed out that, a river ran by Ethiopia. And, I mentioned Assyria as well, so on. But it seems the more reading I do, I'm finding out that the Ethiopians were at first filling up these different lands that we know today as Assyria, and what they're telling us today is Arabia. And so these Ethiopians, they went all over the place from ancient times. And from what I'm gathering so far, although I'm continuing to read and not just have my head stuck in the Bible, is that these Ethiopians, they were all over the place, Australia, India, China, all over the Levant area, Africa, of course. And so it seems as well to me that Adam would have been an Ethiopian. Now, this really is a problem, because if Adam was an Ethiopian, then the people who came out of him, his descendants, would have been Ethiopian as well. And if Eve, if these two people were really the first two people, then Eve would have been an Ethiopian as well, because if she was taken out of him, then of course. But that would then mean that the early and first peoples of the earth were Ethiopians. That's causing some more questions. My effort that I make these days when I try to teach anything from the scriptures is different from when I was a child, because the Bible seems way too incredible in different ways for me to not ask some strong questions. And some people get upset, like they say to me sometimes, like I'm going off the deep end or something like that, like like I don't believe. But I find that these people are more dogmatic about the things that they read in the scriptures. And they never, as far as I understand though, like the many people around me over the years from I was a child until now, they never go outside of their religious thinking, their spiritual thinking that they use when they read the Bible, to being more concerned about the things in the scriptures in a realistic kind of way. And so they're doing what I've always done, which, was to read the scriptures in a spiritual kind of way. And it seems that few, in comparison to the rest of the people on the earth, read the Bible looking at it in a realistic manner. So that some of the stories seem so incredible in the scriptures. One wonders, how could these things have been, or what is the meaning of this or that? Take a look at this here in Judges chapter 14 with Samson. We know Samson was judging over Israel for a time, and this man had to be set apart in a special way. We know the whole deal with this here and how the story goes, but I don't want to focus on the here. Look in chapter 14 of the book of Judges and verse 8 and verse 9. And after a time he returned to take her. So there's this woman that he liked of the other nation, of the Philistines. And he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. So if you read the verses before, there is a lion that he had fought. He killed the lion. So he's coming back now, and some bees made some honey in the carcass of the lion. Now, of course, this is telling you here it was in the dead body of the lion. Because it says carcass, right? Because it says carcass. So there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion, and he took thereof in his hands, and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, who had raised him up to be set apart, or Kadesh, unto the Most High, and gave them, and they did eat. So you see what I mean? This stuff is incredible here. They raised him up to be set apart to the Most High, to do this special work to deliver Israel. But he takes food out of a dead body, and you shouldn't be handling dead things. But he doesn't just handle the dead body of the lion, but he takes food out of it, and gave it unto his parents, who raised them up in a set-apart way, and gave them something that was taken out of an unclean holder, or whatever. I'm trying to find a word to say, like a cup or something, right? But it was out of the carcass of the lion. And he gave them this stuff to eat. So does that make him unclean because he's eating food out of a dead body, and then he's going to pass it on to his parents as well, like a lack of respect for their life? And it's like he doesn't want to share these things with them. And he gave them, and they did eat. But he told them not that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Why? Is it because he knew that they would frown on that? They'd be like, what? Now, can you imagine you're living in a zombie apocalypse time that they have in the movies, and you had to fight off some zombies that were coming to eat up you and kill you and your family. And for some reason, somehow some food got in, whatever, or one of them was eating some food or whatever, But basically food is found eventually in one of them, in their mouth or something like that, the cavity of their mouth. Like he was just trying to eat some burger right when he died, and he saw you and he stopped eating the burger, but the half of it was still left in his mouth. So he decided, what, I'd rather eat you. You killed him, then you take the burger out of his mouth. You see, some of you think it's funny the things I say, but others want to curse me. Listen, I only got one life like you do. I'm going to ask as many questions as I can, because for years I did not ask the questions, and the Bible made me dumb. It made me a complete idiot in life. I'm not going to go out like that anymore. If I'm going to get cut down in the end, I'm going to get cut down having learned some common sense from the biggest thing I believe in this life, that I should read this Bible. I want to ask some questions, like I've said before. Who wrote this book? Where's the man who wrote the Torah, or who was the one to oversee it? Where's that single man who first came up with the idea and got a group of people together and said, maybe we should put a Torah together for the children of Israel to show them our records? We'll get the writings of Jeremiah and of Obadiah and of Elijah and so on, of Moses and so on, and the others. We'll put them all together. And this is a book from God. We're going to give them, we'll publish this. The children of Israel need this. Who is that man who did that? Who is that person? So, a clean, set-apart, righteous man killed a lion and later on took food out of the dead body, and nothing is said there that he even washed out the carcass of the lion. So by the time the bees formed the honey in it, he could say, well, at least the carcass was clean. But there are so many laws in the Torah about not handling dead stuff. And he feeds his body with food that has now become unclean because it was in an unclean carcass for dead body that all kinds of maggots and whatever else had been into. But because this is the Torah, and because there are expert Torah scholars out there, somebody on earth is going to tell you that based on this and that Hebrew word and whatever from the culture, this was so clean honey that even though it was in the body of a dead animal, it was the purest honey on earth. But let me try to give you some food from a dead animal that somebody knocked on their car on the highway, has been there for a couple months. And tell me if you're going to eat that, especially on the Sabbath. So you have enough smartness and wisdom from the Torah to explain to me that it was pure honey that Samson ate from that. But if I were to give you that in the same kind of setting for you to eat, you would squirm and fidget. You wouldn't want to, because it will not be pure to you. But it can be pure because it's on the pages of the scriptures. I'm going to talk to you today. I was listening this morning to Ezekiel, and I don't remember where it was, probably Ezekiel, I don't know, 4 or 5 or somewhere in the early chapters there, I think it was. And It's like the Most High is telling this guy to eat shit, so that Israel, in the outworking of the whole story, will become clean from shit. Wash your garments until they become pure as snow and so on, but eat shit to bring the righteousness. Why? Because the shit's going to show them their condition, and by them learning of their condition, they will do something about it and repent, turn around and change, and then righteousness will come. I can see the outworking of it in that way. But does the man actually eat the shit? Or maybe it sounds too nasty a word to use because I'm talking about the Torah. So let's just say dung, because we can more tolerate that in the scriptures. And if you are in a Christian church, you don't want me getting up there and saying shit anyway. God told this man to eat shit, and would you also eat shit if I'm doing an altar call and ask that to you on your Sunday morning? But if you would tolerate me asking that from your pulpit, you would at least prefer me use the word dung. Because the same shit sounds better if you use another word. And you can't see that your religious perspective is just having you still talk about the same thing. But in order to be righteous, you got to use a different word. I've wondered about Adam. I've got a lesson to do on Adam. I've put it off for so long, probably nearly a year now. But at least still, when you look at the book of Adam and Eve, they try to tell you all kinds of fancy things about Adam and Eve. Sounds so incredible for me to accept it as truth. But then I've got some incredible things in the scriptures. But because I'm so used to the regular scriptures of 66 books, then anything outside of that sounds even more strange. And so if these writings are really all true, then all a deceiver has to do is remove some of the true writings out of the scriptures that people are normally given, for example, in what we call the regular Torah or the KJV, since that's so popular. And as soon as you remove them and put them in some extra biblical collection like Apocrypha, then people will doubt them because they are not used to reading them, and they may be true, or at least one or two of them may be true. But if you put them with other books of deception and people aren't used to them, then they will just seem strange, because some things in some of these apocryphal books seem a little bit strange. I don't read the Apocrypha, but I'll read a verse or two every now and then if it comes up, or if someone's mentioning it, so I'll still know what's there. But I've never read the Apocrypha fully myself. But it's just that by the time I get to it, it sounds so odd that I just can't gravitate to it. But there might be some things true in them. And I suspect that's the case. Some things would probably have to be true, like some of the histories might be true and so on. And but who knows? But with this book of Adam and Eve, some people say it was written possibly 1st to the 4th century AD, but the author is unknown. So the first man and woman is created, and his book gets written so late in history that even the Torah was written before that, way before that. And some have pointed out that the Torah was either written or put together in Babylon, or edited there, whatever the real deal is for this set-apart book. And sometimes I wonder, because why do that to the Torah, put it together or edit it or fix it up nicely around 600 or so BC, whenever it really was? Like I said, I'm not well versed in these matters, but at least I got some general idea, and I got enough sense to question some of these things now. You put that book of God, the God of Israel, together in Babylon, that you hate, and to this day you curse it. And it was put together in a place of evil, Babylon. Why didn't Adam write it in the Garden of Eden? So that Torah would have come to us in pristine condition when the world was brand new and there was no transgression, there was no sin, there was no war, nothing like that. Everything was pure. That would seem to me to be the time when the word would come. And anything else can be added later. So if you add all these stories, excuse me, if you add all these stories and the chronicles and so on and the histories of Israel and the pre-Israelites, later on to what Adam wrote, the Torah that Adam wrote, when things were pure and the Creator first visited him, then I could understand some additions because we're showing some development. But Adam doesn't write anything to communicate to us what the Most High said, as if he is writing it in real time or as soon after he got it from the Creator. But somebody tells us that Adam lived, and this was when he lived, and this is what happened to him. And the man never gets to leave his own writing behind, in a way where we will say, no one else could have written this. This must really have been written by Adam. Somebody else gets to tell a third or fourth or fifth party story about Adam thousands of years later, and the man doesn't get to speak for himself. So he cannot be his own witness of the things that happened in Eden. But because you read the Bible and you say you must love God and you must be saved, then you must also believe. I don't have a problem with that fully. It's just that I want to question, how much should I believe? Adamic Ethiopians. So let's weigh in with some questions on these Ethiopians that came from Adam. And now it is said that the Greeks called these people, these black people, and these early people, Ethiopians, and these Negroes, Ethiopians. But that's not necessarily what they called themselves. So, okay, so we understand that. So, okay, they didn't call themselves that, but we know them as that today. And there are all kinds of words for what they call themselves. But it seems like they broke up into many, many different groups or clans or tribes, and they scattered different places, building different places. Like I opened up saying they traveled here, there, basically almost all over the earth. And they were setting up themselves in different societies and so on. So these Ethiopians were everywhere. Now let me read from 2 Chronicles 14. And some of you might know what I'm probably going to be looking at. The 2 Chronicles 14 verse 8 to 12. You know, they got this thing about God killed, Yahweh killed 1 million Ethiopians. Some people are saying, oh, he didn't kill 1 million, that's wrong, and so on. Anyway, let me just read it here from 2 Chronicles chapter 14, verse 8, and I'll read a few verses, probably down to verse 12. So look at it here now. And Asa had an army of men that bare targets and spears out of Judah, 300,000, and out of Benjamin that bare shields and drew bows, 280,000. All these were mighty men of valor. And there came out against them Zerah the Ethiopian, and this Ethiopian's name means rising. So like he's on the rise, bright, shining, stuff like that. So that sounds like a glorious name. Sounds like a name fitting for a king, and certainly fitting for an Ethiopian king. So there came out against him Zerah the Ethiopian with an host of 1,000 and 300 chariots, and came unto Marisha. So the Israelites had 300,000 to start with from out of Benjamin, and then they mentioned 204,000, whatever, other mighty men of valor. But the Ethiopian Zerah had 1,000,000, so you would say 1,000,000. So they got more people. And then Asa went out against him, and they set the battle in array in the valley of Zephathah at Marisha. And Asa cried unto the Most High, his God, and said, Lord, it is nothing with thee to help, whether with many or with them that have no power. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rest on thee. And in thy name we go against this multitude, O Lord. Thou art our God. So see now, he's not just requesting, but he's worshiping now, because he's praising him and he's confessing thou art. So he's moving into worship. Right? So he's trying to get something out of the Most High now. He's not just simply calling, O Lord, but he's worshiping now, thou art. So when the Most High feels nice about that, oh, he's choosing me, of course he's going to get some kind of answer, right? So thou art our God, let not man prevail against thee. Verse 12, so the Lord smote the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. So basically it seems to me here that they're going out to fight, and they're praying to the Most High to destroy the Ethiopians. A king of rising, Zerah, who could only have risen because he was an Adamic Ethiopian, who were of people who came out of Adam. And having come out of Adam, then he would have risen to power, because you just don't get power if the Most High doesn't give it to you. In some kind of way he allows you. But he is an Ethiopian. He is like of the original people of earth. But of course their names, seems, were covered up by the word Ethiopians. But whoever they are, they came out of Adam. And they were conquering and dominating and ruling the earth. I mean, they're going all over, as I open up saying that these Ethiopians are spread everywhere. And they are ruling the earth. Now, if they're ruling the earth, they're spreading because they came out of Adam, who himself left. And we know Cain had left as well too. But Adam came out of the garden. And so all of their children from him and Eve would then be spreading. So if Adam and Eve were the first people, the people that were spreading, if they were known as Ethiopians, then that means Ethiopians came out of the original Adam and Eve. So then Adam and Eve were Ethiopians. So his descendants spread and grew large as Ethiopians, who set themselves up everywhere. Now these are the Ethiopians who were still found in the time when there was a nation of Israel that began to be known as Israel in the scriptures. So now the Ethiopians, or the children of Adam, who the Most High was dealing with, because he put children in them, so when it's time and they gave birth, they came out with children. So they gave birth to Ethiopians. Now the Most High then set up Ethiopians on the earth, and they were great before him, and they were ruling and so on, and spreading all over, just like he said, multiply on the earth, replenish. So they were obeying that, these Ethiopians, they were doing that. Now I'm not saying everyone was righteous and that no one was evil of the Ethiopians, I'm not trying to say that, but at least in a blanket kind of way, I'm just saying the Ethiopians spread around. Now, they are obeying the Creator by replenishing and so on and filling the earth. And the Most High just shifts and starts to ignore these Ethiopians. and sets up another nation not called Ethiopians, not called Ethiopia, but called Israel, and starts to kill and wipe out the Ethiopians who he was dealing with at the first, who were the only ones to be in the Garden of Eden, because no Israelite was in the Garden of Eden, but an Ethiopian Adam was, and Eve an Ethiopian was. Hello. So the only people, the Ethiopians, to have ever been in the Garden of Eden, they got smacked around and destroyed by the God of Israel, because now he's done with the Israelites, with the Ethiopians, and he's going to set up a new nation now called called Israel. When I read the Torah, I find that the Most High seems to, now I don't know if this is 100%, but because I need many more years of studying the Torah. But it seems so far to be that when the Most High does something, he tries to complete it, even if some problems come into the picture, because let's say man is just not following his instructions and he brings some judgment and so on. But he intends to complete it, it seems, most if not all times. Let's say now, even with the case of Israel, Israel got into trouble and went into captivity and so on, and even in our time here, and then Micah chapter 4, 1 and 2 says, eventually you're going to be restored, like in Isaiah 11, 11 and 12, and gather back and so on, and people are going to come now to Jerusalem in Micah chapter 4 and come to seek the God of Jacob. So what we're seeing is that the Most High intended to set up Israel, because they went down into captivity for a long time. He had to deal with them like that and so on, but he's going to restore them and continue on with the plan, which is to let the earth know about him and his Torah through these same children of Israel. But the children of the Ethiopians, he started something with them in the Garden of Eden, and he doesn't really seem to care about them. He's just going to switch to Israel, and he's not going to go back to the Ethiopians. I just find that so odd that, I got a question and be searching these things out. Some of you are telling me I ask too many questions. You don't ask enough, and you're not providing enough answers. So don't be trying to put down the people who are asking questions. They're asking for a reason. They don't know. I'm not asking these questions to strike down the Torah. I'm asking the questions to learn. I'm considering stuff, and as I've said before, you are hearing my thoughts out loud while I think them. Because some of these things I wasn't thinking before, like to even put in this lesson, like what I read about Samson, that wasn't a part of this. But yeah, I was thinking of that right then, so I read the scripture to wonder how he can be a set-apart man, eating out of a nasty vessel such as the carcass or dead body of an animal that died. You don't think there's a pagan message in that, in your Torah? You don't hear about skull and bones? You don't hear about sorcerers and so on and all kinds of people who do evil stuff and magic and whatever, eating out of the skulls of dead people that they murdered sacrificially unto their gods? And Samson represents deliverance or salvation unto Israel. So he represents salvation and saving and righteousness and all that is good and so on. But he eats out of a carcass of death. And you see people even today drinking and eating out of skulls from dead people to worship their gods of evil. But you say Samson is righteous, and we must only speak good things of him and never curse him in the scriptures, because it is Torah. And you say to me, I shouldn't ask these questions or say these things. See, I've already said it. If the Torah is the Torah, if the Torah is of the Most High, I cannot break it with any question I ask or anything I say, because if the Torah is the Torah from the Creator, it cannot be broken by an unlearned person like myself. So why are you so worried? Is your Torah too weak that you have to try to defend it by saying I shouldn't ask? Hey, I believe the Torah too. Well, of course I do. But listen, if I find something wrong with it, I'm not going to believe that part. And if I eventually after years find too much wrong with it, I'm just going to scrap the whole thing. And I know you hate that. Because most of it can't be wrong. But I suspect that there is a Torah or instruction from the Creator that is real and true. But we have not been given it in its pure or original form. That's what I think. Because too many people have brought out problems with these scriptures. Like you think people have gone around the earth and tampered with holy books, but they never touched the Torah. They never touched the, that's just... And I said already too, Jeremiah said, the scribes have messed up with the stuff. So how do you know which parts they messed with? How can you prove with all certainty which parts they messed up? So this same God of Israel apparently, or as some say, killed 1 million Ethiopians, wiping out the seed of Adam in order to show his new race of people, the Israelites, superior to that which was original, the Ethiopian. Superior, carrying more weight than the original that gave them seed. Because as I look at it, it seems to me, and I'm wondering, that Abraham, according to what some people say, was Cushite, so he was Ethiopian. It seems that Moses, all these people were Ethiopian. It seems to me that the children of Israel were Ethiopian. But I'm looking into that some more. But at least, if that's the case, and I can understand why Moses married an Ethiopian woman and didn't think it was a problem, because he was marrying his own race, his own people. But if Abraham, as some say, was some Cushite Akkadian or Cushite Assyrian, then if Cush is a son of Ham, how do you reverse engineer that to say that? When Ham was not yet born at the time when these Ethiopians were there from the Garden of Eden and after. So Ethiopians are starting to spread all over the earth. Before there was a Noah to have Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ethiopians are existing before Ham came off the boat and had children. So someone is reverse engineering history or the text and telling you that children of Ham, known as Cushites or Ethiopians, existed before Ham was even born and before the earth went through a flood of Noah. Well, also, if that is the case, that these people are Ethiopians, then whoever came off the boat continued to give birth until you get down to Jacob, who had 12 sons to form the nation of Israel. That then means the nation of Israel came out of Jacob, who came out of Isaac, who came out of Abraham, and you go all the way back until they came out of the first Ethiopian. So that means the 12 tribes of Israel came out of Ethiopians. They are Ethiopians. Israel is an Ethiopian nation. Israel is an African nation. The Hebrews are African. But just like the Ethiopians had many different tribes or groups of people, and if Ethiopians started culture and life in India, then really the first people of India were Ethiopians. But now you will just say it is India. So then Israel would then just be, or the Hebrews that became Israel would just be another group of Africans or one of the groups of the Ethiopians. So then Israel can be thought of as being, if I'm correct, Cushite Israel or Cushite Israelites, not as a small subset, not as a subset of the Israelites, but that all of the Israelites are Ethiopians. But somebody says Menelik doesn't have a place in any of this. And I'm not defending Menelik and this whole Queen of Sheba stuff and so on, because I haven't read enough to deal with that. But obviously I'm going to have to go there one of these days and look into it. I just find it strange that you got this compact Zondervan Bible dictionary. Too bad I don't have it with me right now to read it. But they talk about this definition of the Negro, and they say, I can't remember it properly, but you all know it, something like Ham is the father of the dark races, something like that it says. And they name them out, but not the Negro. So I'm wondering, how do you define the Negro? Because when I read, I find different definitions. But it seems in general that the Negro is dark-skinned, and of course it comes in different shades and so on, but they've got, just as an easier one, instead of talking about their nose and so on, they've got hair like kaya, that we'd say in Jamaica, kaya, or, woolly hair. Kaya that's from your mattress where it's curly and whatever, but they've got woolly hair. Now, these people who are Ethiopians, who you say are not Israelites, and you see them from these ancient drawings and so on and walls, ruling Assyria, Babylon, and all these other places, these people have these woolly hair as well. So how do you define or tell who is the Negro? Is that enough to tell who is a Negro? Because it seems to me that if you say the Israelite is the Negro, then who is the Negro who is the Ethiopian? Or who is the Ethiopian who looks just like the Negro? And of course we know this is not dealing with the modern Ethiopia, because we know the whole switch in history, Abyssinia, whatever. But Ham is the father of the dark races, but not the Negro. But there are a lot of dark people who were Negroes, who were being told were not of the Church of Israel and are not even Hebrews. It's starting to make me wonder, if someone made a book and said, this is your Torah, and put these things in it to create a race, a group of people, a nation called Israelites, or at least edited the Torah to put in lies in it to make it sound like that, but in some kind of way, the Most High is dealing with a Church of Israel, and is done with some original Ethiopians. I could be wrong in it all. I'm just questioning. But I'm going to be looking into it more and more. But if any of the questioning helps you to think, instead of just being some spiritual zombie, eaten out of the carcass of the understanding that other people have given to you, who sometimes didn't know what they were saying, and sometimes were just straight out deceiving us, then hey, let it help you to at least start to dig and search and ask some further questions. So in the scripture I read from 2 Chronicles 14, it seems about 1 million Ethiopians were killed. Solomon's son Menelik from the Queen of Sheba brought back the Ark of the Covenant. So this story is telling us that in pre-Christian times, the connection with the Creator returns to the Ethiopians, like it seems to have begun with Ethiopians in Eden, or what we might call Ethiopians. Then Christianity came later on. But prior to that, it seems that the Ethiopians were running earth. Not until some Torah Christian-like type of teachings come on, do we find a little more information about a group of people called Israelites. I know I'm walking a tightrope right there, so I understand that. So if you cuss me out a little bit, I can understand that. But I'm just saying, it just seems a little bit strange, right? Like, before enemies of Negroes, or before enemies of black people, so-called black people, or enemies of the Ethiopians really took over, it seems like the more things that we're finding in ancient history are not dealing with children of Israel, but are dealing with Ethiopians who were fighting among themselves, of course, and no different from how Israel was fighting among themselves. The different tribes were sometimes fighting, and north and south kingdom fighting. So the people the Most High started dealing with, who got kicked out of Eden, and their children grew into this great Ethiopian nation, and then split up as they traveled and settled into different lands, they were also fighting among themselves. So it's just the same. But then the Torah now, or the Bible, seems to show a different group of people, Israel, fighting among themselves, and they just totally take over, and nobody really cares much about original Ethiopians that the Most High walked up to into the Garden of Eden and say, this is the kind of food you should eat, and don't touch that tree, and so on. The Most High was dealing with Ethiopians, it seems to me. And all of a sudden now, they've done something so bad that the Most High can't deal with Ethiopians anymore. He's just going to deal with Israelites. And Israelites did things so bad that they pissed off the Creator, so he kicked them out of his land, but he's going to give them a saving grace later in the end. But he don't really care much about Ethiopia. Yeah, I know you're going to tell me, well, the Bible says Ethiopia stretched out his hand and whatever. But in large part, it seems that there is the Israelite that's going to be getting saved, and a little of Ethiopia is going to get tacked on to the salvation. He don't really care about Ethiopia anymore. It's just Israel, Israel, Israel all the way. Israel just dominates the scripture. And for all of you who, according to the Christian thought, who was set up by Greeks and Romans, that somehow this God, Yahweh, needs to send a Savior to die on Calvary for the children of Israel who transgressed and who went astray. Well, if Ethiopians sinned in Eden, and after that with their fighting of each other and getting wicked with each other, whatever, why didn't the same Yahweh, since he was dealing with them first, find it a good thing to send a Savior to die on Calvary for them, to redeem Ethiopians? Ethiopians have a lot of the original information about the stars and the earth and the trees and nature in general, and the movement of stars and moon and whatever the sun does and so on. They've got all this original ancient information. I'm reading now, and some things are just like shocking me, even this morning again. And the Israelite didn't have that originally. It was the Ethiopian. And the Most High just gets rid of these people with all this knowledge that should not go away from the earth, and just starts up a nation called Israel and say, I'm just going to deal with Israel now. I'm going to give them new laws that even the Ethiopians didn't have. And to hell with what the Ethiopians learned and figured out about the earth and the sky and the heavens. Even though the same scriptures from the Israelites say the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament showed his handiwork. But Ethiopians were studying and peering into the heavens that declare and the firmament that shows the Creator's work. Ethiopians were busying themselves with that and found out all kinds of things. But if the Israelite says in the scriptures this and that about the Creator, about the God of Israel, we're like, whoa, revelation. But when the Ethiopian found out all those things that people are still studying today, wondering how these mighty, magnificent Ethiopians learned these things, it doesn't carry as much weight as what the Israelite found out when their God, Yahweh, told them to slaughter and butcher the animals of the earth and kill them off to offer sacrifices to me. It's like it doesn't really matter what the Ethiopians did. And Moses married an Ethiopian woman and getting cussed out of it. And now a lot of us today who are Israelites are starting to look into Ethiopian knowledge, Ethiopian information, and so on. All these people who are enemies have conquered and taken over the Ethiopians and raped their knowledge and so on. And the Ethiopians don't matter so much that even Yahweh couldn't bother with them anymore. He just slaughtered them and just set up Israelites. I'm just saying it sounds a little bit odd to me, you know. I mean, sorry to piss you off, you know, on your Sabbath day and so on, but man, like so Ethiopians mattered first at the start of the earth and in Garden of Eden and so on, and right after that, then Sumer and so on. Ethiopians mattered first. They're starting civilization. And they mattered first before the Israelite mattered, because there was no Israelite at first. When the Creator blessed these Ethiopians with great and massive knowledge of the earth and of the heavens. It seems to me then, while I continue to study it some more, that the Hebrew Israelites are then physically Hamites or of Cush, like I said before. Because if you said the Israelites did this and that and whatever, and it's been covered up, that just means that it's because they were Cushites. They were Hamites. That's where they get all that knowledge from. Just because the Most High took you out of Egypt, all of a sudden you've got expert knowledge of the stars and whatever, and of the watching of the moon and the weather and the earth and the plants to heal your body and so on. No. Maybe it's just the case that he marched out, if this is correct, that he marched out a group of people out of Egypt who were being oppressed by their other brothers because they were of a different mindset toward the Creator and towards the earth and so on. And he marched out that group because the others of the Ethiopians had probably become more taken away in their mind and probably became more wicked toward each other and so on, and didn't mind oppressing each other and didn't, you know, I don't know. Like, it's all a jumble now, right? So it's like a learning curve I'm going through. So if these Cushites became Israelites, where does Shem fit into the picture? Because Shem is not Ham. So if the Israelites, and if Abraham is a Cushite, in what sense is he a Cushite? Was he just called a Cushite just because he was living among Ethiopians? Just the same way you say, well, I'm an Israelite, but I'm living in America, so I'm an American. You know, you would call me an American. Is that the sense in which Abraham is seen as being a Cushite? But he wasn't really a Cushite. Well, if he wasn't a Cushite, what was he then, an Israelite, when there was no Israelite at that time? Is that the sense in which Abraham is seen as being a Cushite? But he wasn't really a Cushite. Well, if he wasn't a Cushite, what was he then, an Israelite, when there was no Israelite at that time? So Shem seems to have snuck into the picture somewhere, because these people seem to be Hamites or Cushites who came out of Abraham and so on, right? And you notice they're always being dealt with in Ethiopia and going on to Egypt and so on. Why? Because they're all the same people, it seemed to me. They came out of the same stock of people that came out of Adam and Eve. And they just simply moved around, setting up their different lands. They spread around. So Shem seems to have just snuck somewhere into the picture mysteriously. And somebody else gets the benefit from Shem. So if Shem should not be in the picture, then that's some type of like Christian-like replacement theology, where Shem replaces the Cushite that was dominating the earth. And out of Shem now comes Israel. So it seems to me now, if you read different scriptures, it tells you the Most High saying to his people, you're going to be cut down and so on for your transgressions and so on. But what about these ancient Ethiopians who the Creator was dealing with at the first? It seems like they have been dethroned in history. It seems like they were cut down by the enemy. Doesn't that seem like that to you? How could they be cut down if they were not up? So what? The Creator can't raise them up, so he just makes a new nation? Like he doesn't have the power to raise them up? And you look at famous Amos 9 verse 7. Are ye not as children of the Ethiopians unto me? O children of Israel, saith the Most High. Have not I brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines and Caphtor and the Syrians from Ker? These places look to me like places where Ethiopians were originally and started these places. So are you not as children of the Ethiopians? Aren't you the same as them? Aren't you one people? Haven't I brought you up, Israel, out of the land of Egypt? Aren't you the same as these people? So could it just be that Ethiopians went astray then? If they were starting to kill and fight amongst themselves and kill, each king trying to kill the next king to just be super powerful, they're killing. That can't be right either. So maybe the Most High just made a group of people, called them Israel. But they're one people, they're still Ethiopian. So as you can see, there's a lot of questioning, a lot of studying, and a lot of reading that needs to be done. But at least you must start to get into your mind that there really are other alternatives to what you read in the scriptures. So they say Abraham was an Ethiopian, Akkadian, or Cushite Ethiopian. But let's wipe out the race of the Ethiopians and forefathers of the Ethiopians. And the only forefathers that's going to matter to the person reading the Torah, who says they're an Israelite, is their Israelite forefather. But those forefathers seem to have had Ethiopian forefathers in order to have become anyone who became known as a Hebrew Israelite. So the real forefather of the Israelite is an Ethiopian. But you try to make all your forefathers be a Shemite just because, and to pull away from being Cushite, just because somebody gives you a Torah and says, you must read this. And the biggest people benefiting right now from the identity of Shemites and forefathers of the people in the Bible are the people in Israel right now who were never given these things in the scriptures as far as we have studied and seen. So could it be that they could claim this Shemite stuff and maybe somehow either benefit from or have this Shemite story put in because they cannot claim to be real Ethiopians? You see how I'm trying to get you to think of things? Who wrote this book? So these real Cushite forefathers who people like Abraham lived among, they were destroyed and wiped out in history by everyone else who came along, but certainly by the new super race, the Israelite as well. And so their history was wiped out. Look at this. A thought came to me yesterday. It seems early empires and new city setups and so on, like Sumer, Assyria, Babylonia, Uruk, and so on. These kings seem to have all been fighting. First of all, it's a little odd to me that all of a sudden, Cain gets sent away and Adam gets kicked out of the garden, and almost right away, relatively speaking, people just know that they should be kings, and it's not that they just like looking like they're ruling. They even know that they should wear a crown on their head. Like, maybe if one guy in Sumer had something that he called a crown on his head, but other people who are kings or who are rulers are just there, but they don't necessarily have this thing on their head. Maybe if it's like that, then it seems a little less strange. But it's like everybody right after Eden in this Sumeria just seems to all have this uniform thing where they all need to be sitting on a throne and a big special chair, and all need to have crowns on their heads. Like this is a uniform thing across the board. Like everybody after Adam gets kicked out, everybody just needs to try to be a king. And they know instinctively that they should fight and kill the next king and take over. It's like there's just a culture of kingship and of conquering the next person. Nobody has interest in living in fairness and love, quote unquote love. Now people could give a damn about love. We just left Eden, and instead of being repentant of what happened to get us kicked out, we're just going to kill and slaughter everybody. But everybody needs to know. It's like, if there is no such thing as a mall and the earth gets destroyed by another great flood, and you have a couple children and they all scatter, and you in your last days now build up something called a mall and people can go in and buy their stuff or whatever, you set up money, whatever, and end up traveling way across the other side of the earth, have to go look for your children and see their children and so on. Is it that likely that all your children, let's say if they've had a lot of people now and they set up like 1,000 new places and 1,000 new lands, is it likely that just because you set up a mall and you travel over there and see them, man, it's like how long? And let's say we're all living like a couple thousand years, or 1,000 years old, and after 500 years you go look for them, and it just happens that all of them are all having malls as well, with the same setup that you have, and all of them have escalators in the mall, just the same way that you've got it. So it just looks funny that this Sumer gets set up and whatever, and everybody just seems to have a big throne. Everybody has a crown on their head, and everybody knows that they should be a king that wears something on their head and so on. It just, it's like, history just seems way too strange. It's not showing that somebody in Sumer was a king and he decided he needs a special chair and he needs this round thing on his head called a crown. And it takes 3,000 years later or 2,000 years or whatever time for people to decide that, you know what, in order for me to be a king, I should look like him and I should make that thing and put it on my head as well. No, right away they just all have to put this thing on their head. Like there's some common knowledge base, common thinking. It more seems to me like there was one group of ancient people who had the thought in their mind to set up this kind of kingship, this kind of rulership, and they'd make a throne and make a crown to put on the head of that king, and they just went and traveled and duplicated it. That seems to me to be more. And if that is the case, then it seems like it was just Ethiopians who were just traveling and populating the place and doing that kind of stuff. To have duplicated it everywhere, to set up these pyramids everywhere, to set up all these ziggurats everywhere. It seems to me to be like that, as opposed to every kind of different person just come on, But it's still strange though, because if you set up an international company, somebody sets up an international company, would they set it up just with a janitor and a mailman kicking it off? To kick off that, not just a little store, but an international company with many, many branches all over. And they're going to just set it up with a janitor and a mailman. Or would you have like a CEO and he's putting together other kinds of top people, top persons to come together and have many meetings to discuss and plan it out and so on and help launch it out and so on, and then they hire lots of people and so on. That seems to me to be the way it would go. You don't just start off your international company with one janitor and one mailman. But the Creator, according to the understanding that we have of Torah, whether it's the Torah that has a problem or it is the understanding of the Torah that we have been given and lied to about, that the Torah is trying to get us to see that the Most High set up an earth, put one man and one woman in that garden, and then just leave it for everybody to come in sooner and start Sumer and set up themselves as kings and just start slashing and killing everybody. Babylonians fighting and killing Assyrians, Assyrians fighting and killing Babylonians, everybody else, Akkadians fighting this, they're just all, just like murder and mayhem, mayhem. And then 2,000 or 3,000 years after he created the earth, or after he started with Adam, about 3,500 years later, he says, you know what, something's wrong on the earth here. I'm going to set up a nation called the Children of Israel, and they're going to drop my instructions on the earth, my law, my Torah, so the earth can know me and know what I want. But for 3,000 years before, he just had people just starting and killing people, all these crying people who weren't into evil and fighting and so on. Just regular families just wanted to live, and somebody who is evil has to come and say, give me one of your newborn sons so I can slaughter him and sacrifice him. And all people crying out of this wickedness. And the Creator doesn't do anything about this. He waits 3,000 years to say, I'm going to set up a nation called Israel so people can know how to live on the earth. Looks to me like he's just setting up this whole thing like one janitor and one mailman to run a company called Earth. Instead of having given his instructions from the start, don't you see something is strange about this Torah, the way we've been given it? Something is not right. Something is missing. So I got to question stuff. And hopefully you will question, and your questioning will lead to more further searching. Too many of us are just reading the Bible talking about keep Sabbath, keep Sabbath, keep Sabbath. Like, is that all there is? So now look at Psalm 107, verse 17, as I close it out here. Fools because of their transgression and because of their iniquities are afflicted. Fools because of their transgression and because of their iniquities are afflicted. People are digging into this ancient Ethiopian history more and more, and are always uncovering the greatness of these people. And many of us who say we're Israelites are using that information to teach as well. So it seems that they are so great that you got to bypass the history of Israel to find. Could it be the Israelite is just an Ethiopian? But a book makes you think otherwise, to wipe out the knowledge of Ethiopia from your mind. So that it is Ethiopia that is being cursed. He brought them down. But you are told in the scriptures that it is Israel he brought down. Because of their transgression they are afflicted. Don't look like Ethiopians from ancient times were afflicted. Maybe they went so far with all their stuff, then they turned into whatever, and we know they started Egypt, and Egypt was started by Ethiopians then, and so they just lost their mind and went way into some strange occult kind of stuff and all kinds of wickedness, and the other places that they started sacrificing humans and so on, whatever. All these things would have come out of what the Ethiopians did, this it seems to me. So if they lost their way on the earth by doing all these things, then they transgressed like the verse is saying, and they were cut down. Is it the case that somebody is telling you it's Israel that was cut down and kicked out of the land? Or do you see Ethiopians over thousands of years now being cast out of their lands, being kicked out of their lands, and having to live elsewhere, and to this day they are being fought against, subjugated, kept down, and so on. Their histories are being changed, and so on. All the things that you say happened to the children of Israel in the pages of the story in the Bible about Israel. But in real life, it happens to a people of Ethiopia, ancient ones. And it's like you never connect it, because your religious book tells you this is the instruction and the knowledge for you to believe. And Ethiopians are being sucked out of African lands to go and live everywhere else slowly. And somebody else is moving into that land and taking it over, that some say is the Garden of Eden. Sounds kind of funny, doesn't it?